This time on Allies or Enemies, we are talking about Marvel Dice Throne. Designed by Gavin Brown, Nate Chatelier, and Manny Tremblay, Marvel Dice Throne has players rolling dice and playing cards in a slugfest for Marvel's superiority using the popular Dice Throne system. It's mostly a mono fight, with players each choosing one of the 8 available Marvel characters, although there are variants for 3 or 4 players. Unless you got the Kickstarter, these will come in a main box of 4 and then 2 smaller boxes of 2 each. None of the boxes necessarily need the others though, so you can start with whatever you want, based on the characters and playstyle you like. Although I hope you like rolling dice, because whoever you are, you will be rolling a lot of dice. We'll walk through all the characters in a minute though. First, let's start with a look at how the game plays.
To set up the game, draw 4 cards and set your combat points dial to 2. This is what you spend to play cards, and your health dial to 50. This is what keeps you alive. At the start of each turn, you will first gain income of 1 combat point and 1 card, although the first player skips this in round 1. Then you will play cards from your hand as long as you can pay combat points for them. Next is the rolling phase, which is the heart of the game, where Yahtzee style, you will roll 5 dice and then re-roll as many as you want, up to twice. The goal is to align the result with the various powers on your board. These will be different for different heroes, but generally they'll include things like small and large straights, various sets of symbols, and a big bad ultimate, and will sometimes also deal various status effects. Some cards can also be spent during this phase to manipulate dice. If you hit an opponent, they will usually have a chance to activate a defensive power and roll some dice of their own, although some damage is undefendable. Then you have a second chance to play cards, and finally, sell any extra cards in your hand to bring that hand size back down to 6. The game keeps going back and forth like this until someone is knocked down to 0 health and a victor is crowned.
As you might imagine, this game is hugely variable between the 8 available characters. In fact, let's just take a minute to walk you through them. Thor is all about chucking Mjolnir around, and he's a bit of an all-rounder with decent defense, as well as building up big electrical charges for big hits. Spider-Man can be swingy, pun very much intended, as he tries to set up for back-to-back combo turns and has both attack and defense powers that depend on big rolls for big gains. Scarlet Witch plays the meta game, changing dice all over the place, along with forcing you to roll one of her dice in place of your own, which obviously gets in the way. And Loki is fittingly the king of misdirection, blocking his opponent's powers and protecting himself with his illusion power, which is maybe the best thing in the game. For the expansion characters, we have Captain Marvel, who is very much attack, 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 with offense leading basically every power. Black Panther, who conversely gets his power from getting hit and storing the kinetic energy to power up his suit and deliver big hits. Black Widow, who is the master of the combo, with a focus on training and upgrading that pays off big. And Doctor Strange, who is one of the hardest to use, but can set up cool combos if he can load and then cast his spells at the right time.
The game is officially for 2 to 4 players, or even 6 with expansions, but you will almost certainly play the vast majority of your games at 2. As is often the case with head-to-head games like this, the 1 versus 1 is really the best way to play, while the other modes feel a little bit like variants. That said, the 4-player mode puts players into teams of 2, allowing them to share info and some effects and powers, and this can lead to some interesting combos. While 3 players will play a kind of King of the Hill mode, where they get to draw a card if they attack the current leader. This can work in an even game, but if you get out ahead early, you feel like you are getting blue-shelled forever. At 5 or 6 players, we'd probably recommend just splitting up and doing a tournament. The game can technically work at those numbers, but even the rulebook cautions against it for all but the most experienced players.
The retail version that we have is a smidge different from the Kickstarter, but by and large, it is pretty darn close to the same, and the product you get is solid. The individual character trays make it super simple to set up and pack away. The player boards are excellent quality, really clear and easy to read, and the power leaflets explain the various tokens well, with in-depth explanations on the backs. The customized player dice are also solid quality, with color schemes and symbols that all match the corresponding heroes. The cards do feel a bit thin, however, and ours are already showing some dents, so you may want to sleeve them. And while most things are nice and clear, there are still some examples of awkward wording that we had to search online, mostly to do with kinds of damage and the defendableness of that damage. But by and large, a lot of effort has gone into both ease of play and making each hero look and feel unique. There are also those little standees, but we have no idea what they're used for.
We have played more than a dozen games of this in the last week alone, so obviously we like it. But even still, there are some caveats. First of all, it is heavily a dice game, and that means that there will be games where it just feels like you are fated to lose. There are always odds you're playing and options you can take, and you can gather cards to mitigate, and honestly, turns where we've come up totally empty are fairly rare, but even so, your fate will never be fully in your hands. Also, as tends to be the case with asymmetric games, there are some characters that just feel a bit stronger than others, or at least have tough matchups with certain heroes. But if you are okay with that necessary randomness and an occasional tough battle, this is a fun two-player smash 'em up that wraps up in 20-ish minutes and captures the superhero battle feeling better than the vast majority of other Marvel games out there. And that is it. Have you played Marvel Dice Throne? Who are your favorite heroes and which other Marvel games would you recommend? And as always, please do like, comment, and subscribe. And hopefully, we will see you all next time for another game.